Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Hello, folks. It's Wednesday night, and you know what time that is. It is time for the FantasyGreek.com starts and sits in 60 minutes. I'm Keith Grieve from 87sportsfans.com, joined every week at this time by Mr. James Sarantias, the Fantasy Greek himself. Follow him on Twitter, folks, at the Fantasy Greek. Jim, welcome to another Wednesday night in paradise.
Wow, paradise, huh? Chicago or... Where are you? Are you in Buffalo?
Yeah. No, Rochester. Buffalo is the armpit of the earth. Rochester is slightly more towards the midriff.
Okay. All right. Well, in any case, we're 30 degrees out here, and if that's paradise, I guess I'll take it. Keith, God bless. Good to hear from you. Good to talk to you. I've had just an outstanding evening. I was just on 1420 a.m., ESPN Honolulu, and I want to give a big shout out to my boys, Chris and Gary, the sports animals over there, who had me on their show, and it was just a lot of fun, about 10, 15 minutes or so. Took a bunch of calls from their listeners, and it was just a lot of fun. Can't tell how great it was.
This show brought to you by DraftKings.com. Millions are being made all season long at DraftKings.com, America's favorite one-week fantasy football site. One-week fantasy means no season-long commitments. Play whenever you want. Got an injured player? No problem. At DraftKings.com, it's like a new season every week, so you're never stuck with the same players. Pick your team in minutes, and you could be on your way to winning huge cash. This season, one listener turned $10 into $5,000. Another turned $2 into $10,000. And a new millionaire has been crowned nearly every week this season at DraftKings.com. You could be next. Imagine winning $1 million in one day just playing fantasy football at DraftKings.com. Get free entry into their $100,000 fantasy football contest this weekend, where first place takes home $10,000. Head to DraftKings.com now and enter promo code Spreaker to play for free. DraftKings.com. Bigger events, bigger winnings, bigger millionaires. Enter Spreaker for free entry now at DraftKings.com. DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
So, Keith, that whole little that bit reminded me of something when I was a kid, and I used to work at the coffee shop. We had a lotto machine, and there's this World War II vet, Lenny. Lenny would always, when the lotto would get up, even if it was just $10 million, he'd ask people if they're going to get a ticket. While he's sitting there having his cup of coffee, they're like, "No, what for? I'm never going to win." He's like, "No ticky, no winnie." So go play on DraftKings, my friends.
Yes. You have to be in it to win it.
That's right.
So, all right. So if you're new to the program, we go through matchup by matchup and tell you who should be on your fantasy radar and who you should avoid like the plague that's not on the Chicago Bears. Sorry, I had to throw in a little dig there. I'm very anti this week for reasons that need no explaining. But if you have a personal lineup question, issue, conundrum, kerfuffle, call 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. And we can together pick Jim's brain, what's left of it anyway, after this season. So, without further ado, Thursday night, Buffalo versus Miami, one of the great NFL rivalries in the last 25 years, the Bills and the Dolphins. All I'm hearing around here is squish the fish, and it's just annoying, to tell you the God's honest truth. For the Bills, they're coming off a very lackluster outing against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs really played a very good defensive game, and they made Kyle Orton have to beat them. And if you have been if you've been a fan of any team Kyle Orton has played for previously, you know that's a tall order to fill. For the Miami Dolphins, they did have their mojo going for a little while before last week's lost in really a game they could have and maybe should have won. I know we can go back and forth all day on that, but this game is in Miami. It's a division rivalry game. I always like to take the home team. It's a prime time game too, so South Beach should be jumping. I'm going to pick the Dolphins.
Keith, I'm going to take the Dolphins too. This should be a low-scoring defensive battle between two teams that are pretty much evenly matched. And you put their numbers on paper and start comparing, and except for the offenses, these teams are almost step by step the same team. In terms of offense, the Dolphins hold the edge, and I can see that playing through in what should be a tough game this week down there in Miami. In terms of fantasy, there's not going to be a lot of players that you're going to turn to in this one, except for the defenses, which you should start. Neither quarterback is the strongest in the league. Both defenses have excelled, especially the Dolphins. I like Fred Jackson in this one as an RB2. He should be set if they give him the load, which I think they will this week. Maybe work Anthony Dixon in a little bit, but it should be the Fred Jackson show. We're talking about 100 yards and maybe a touchdown. Sammy Watkins, he's tough. Everybody's going to want to play him, and I don't blame anybody for doing it because he has been such a breath of fresh air. And he's done it against some pretty good defenders, but he's going to be pulling Brent Grimes. Grimes has been doing a really solid job against WR1s. And for Lamar Miller, be careful this week. Anybody who has him on their team, he was still banged up last week, and I'm not sure that he's gotten through it. But you know what? It's beautiful, sunny, Miami. It's going to be nice. It's going to be lovely. The Bills are going to enjoy it just a little too much. Miami wins.
The Atlanta Falcons travel to the Carolina Panthers, and if there is a poster child for disappointing teams, it's the Atlanta Falcons this year. Coming off last season's injury-riddled loss, a lot of people were expecting the Falcons to get back on the horse. That has not happened. They're 3-6. And they play the Carolina Panthers, who are as much of a dumpster fire as anybody could have predicted. Cam Newton has struggled for whatever reason, whatever you want to call it. But the thing is that these teams are very similar in a couple different standpoints. The Falcons rush 97 yards per game. The Panthers rush 95 yards per game. On the defensive side, the Falcons allow 280 yards through the air. The Carolina Panthers 254. The Falcons allow 124 yards per game on the ground. The Panthers 122. What's different? The difference here is that the Falcons have the 7th-ranked passing offense at 7th, and the Panthers, they just don't have enough talent. So even though the Panthers are at home and this is a division game, I'm going to buck my previous trend, and it just comes down to both of these teams are really downright deplorable on defense, but the Falcons have the more talented offensive roster, and I will pick the Falcons in this game.
Falcons are the favorite team in this game, Keith, and you've already touched on it. These are the two worst defenses in the league by far. If you look at the Panthers, it's just terrible. I mean, in every defensive category, if they're not at the top, they're close to the top. So they're sort of in that conversation, and what makes things worse for them is their offense is absolutely deplorable. They haven't even on average broken 20 points per game. They are one of the top 10 worst offenses in the league, and that's very sad because in the last 2 seasons, Cam Newton has been one of the best quarterbacks, at least on the gridiron, maybe not the fantasy gridiron every season, but this season he's been more of a QB2, more of the second guy rather than the first, and I know it doesn't help that he's banged up, but so be it. In this game, solid plays are going to include Matt Ryan as a solid to low-end QB1, Julio Jones, Roddy White as top wide receivers. In essence, the Panthers give up the 7th most fantasy points to those two positions. And this week, I absolutely love Steven Jackson as an RB2 or a flex play against a defense giving up, I believe it's number 6, the 6th most fantasy points allowed to the position. So for once, instead of me poo-hooing Steven Jackson, I'm on the Steven Jackson train, and so should you in fantasy football. For the Panthers, Cam Newton's going to remain a low QB1. I could see him throwing 2 TDs this week, but if he's going to do better than that, that's hard to say. Calvin Benjamin remains a weekly must-start. We saw how dangerous he can be, especially in the red zone last week. If you want some sleeper plays this week, or if you need the help, look no further than D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart for a low RB2 or a flex play. This is the second worst rush defense in fantasy that the Falcons are fielding. D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart should do some things and help you out if you need it. Greg Olsen, you know what to say about that. He's a must start. Don't expect a lot out of these defenses. And other than that, rise up Atlanta. Falcons win.
All right, and now we get to a game that is near and dear to my heart, the Minnesota Vikings at the Chicago Bears. There is nothing good to be said about the Chicago Bears. They fail at every aspect of the game from a win-loss standpoint. There are some upsides fantasy-wise because they are probably going to be trailing in every game this year, so Jay Cutler should be able to throw the ball. I would assume. I'll leave the fantasy analysis to you. The on-the-field stuff, while Teddy Bridgewater's a rookie, it won't matter because the Bears are atrocious on defense. Jerick McKinnon is averaging almost 5 yards per carry this season in replacement of Matt Asiata, who was in place of Adrian Peterson, who still has not made made a judgment on his status. I'm having trouble talking tonight. They're the 10th rated rushing offense. The Bears are the 24th rushing defense. The Vikings' passing defense is ranked 4th as far as yards per game. That does not bode well for Jay Cutler, who last week against the Packers, just to tell you something about Jay Cutler and how bad he's been, with no pressure, okay, 27 of his 41 dropbacks were with no pressure. Cutler went 15 of 26 for 158 yards and an interception. That's this season in a microcosm. All of the promise, all of the hopes are gone. It's lost. I am off this wagon. I am picking the Vikings on the road to go into Chicago and drive the bar even lower for Bears fans.
Wow, that's going to be really tough to do because I see the Bears jumping back this week. In fact, they have to. Their back's against the wall. If they actually do lose this game, their season is done. It's over. And I don't see them letting that happen. Last week was an embarrassment. They should be ashamed of themselves, and they should come out and treat the Vikings like a punching bag. That having been said, the Vikes are going to put up a fight defensively, and I actually like their defense this game against Cutler. This is a week where a lot of the defenses that are going to be mentioned, you're not starting them because the matchup is necessarily great in terms of fantasy points allowed, but you're starting them because of issues with the quarterback, whether it be a rookie quarterback or it be a quarterback that's struggling. Jay Cutler is a quarterback that's struggling. I wouldn't play him in fantasy this week because of the risk involved, but you want to start the Vikings in case it happens. I mean, certainly he'll make at least one mistake. Maybe 2, maybe 3. But if it gets out of hand, you want to be there when that happens with the Vikings. From an offensive standpoint, Matt Forte makes for a top fantasy play here. The Vikings do struggle in rush defense, giving up usually a touchdown, but then a bunch of all-purpose yards to the position. You got to like the running game for the Vikings as well. Jerick McKinnon and Matt Asiata. And in fact, I like Matt Asiata as a super sleeper this week. Probably somebody that's not going to be talked about. You can see the Vikings getting to the goal line this week, and he is a vulture, a goal line TD vulture. So for him to get 2 or 3 rushing TDs would not surprise me. So consider Matt Asiata for the flex if you need the help. Keep Brandon Marshall, keep Alshon Jeffrey, keep Martellus Bennett active this week, because that is the best aspect of this Bears team. And any one of them can hit 100 yards in a score easily against the Vikings because they're just that good when everything's working. And lastly, for the Vikings, they should get Kyle Rudolph this week. The Bears are now giving up the most fantasy points to tight ends. If Rudolph is active, you get him in your lineup. Bears win.
So you said you wouldn't start Jay Cutler. What if you named your fantasy team Cuddy Does It and you have Jay Cutler?
I'm sorry, you name your fantasy team what?
Cuddy Does It.
I say to you, don't you have anything better to do with your time?
Obviously, that name was
football teams.
That name was picked out in August. Obviously. So.
Well, I knew there were a lot of people that were high on Jay Cutler at the beginning of the season because of analysts and people getting a little crazy. Look, the bottom line is his best season as a quarterback was back when he was with the Broncos. We haven't seen that since. So unless he moves mountains, and if he does, I would rather be on the sideline or let him be on another team when he does move mountains. I wouldn't go near him. But he has